to join us. And thanks very much, everybody. My name is David Layton. We're thrilled to have our partner, Northern Trust, lead today's webinar on human-centered design and how, they shifted a 130-year-old company into reinventing the client and partner experiences. And for those of us that work for large organizations, we know how that is. So I'm going to send it over to Margaret. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today. Welcome to all of you in our virtual room. My name is Margaret Chagreau, and I'm the head of Northern Trust's Digital Services Run and Change Management team. This panel will be focused on a really interesting topic: how to drive innovation and spur the success of digital transformation using human-centered design. It's all about understanding our clients' needs and motivations by inviting them into the design process so we can boost the likelihood of building digital solutions that add value. So I'm excited to kick off this discussion by welcoming my esteemed colleagues who are part of this all-star panel. Each of them oversees different aspects of digital transformation within our wealth management practice. And I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Carrie, would you like to start?
I would, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. So I'm Carrie Palmer. I am on our experience design and research team, where I serve as design director for our wealth management business, working very closely alongside David, Sakshi, and Melissa. David, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm thrilled to be here and just very happy to be part of this team with such a talented group of Northern Trust folks. So my name is David Hines. I'm a senior director in wealth management technology. My role is delivery and execution around a variety of cloud and SaaS products for our wealth management line of business, as well as delivery and execution for our digital metamorphosis. So I've been at Northern, approximately 14 years, which I, hate to admit, but it has been an absolute pleasure working here. I've played just about every role on the tech side, from a junior developer all the way to data architect, and now, senior leadership. So a lot of really interesting change happening here. We're very thrilled to be talking through that today.
Hi, my name is Melissa Escobedo, and I'm happy to be here as well. My role at Northern Trust is I'm a product owner, and so I work with partners. I'm kind of the in-between partners and our development team to make sure that we're delivering and bringing functions and services to our users that work with our systems. Thank you.
Sakshi, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Sakshi. I've been in Northern for approximately 19 years, 14 of which is full-time employee. And in my role, I am a lead Scrum Master, and I am responsible for creating high-functional delivery teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introductions. So for those of you who are not familiar with Northern Trust, I'd like to provide you with a really quick overview of who we are, so you have some context about what we'll describe today. Northern Trust is a preeminent global financial institution that provides asset servicing, investment management, and wealth management services for institutions, high net worth individuals, and families. Our success has been anchored in one purpose: to serve as our clients' most trusted financial partner, guarding and growing their assets as though they are our own. You want to go to the next slide, and I think this is an overview of Northern Trust Wealth Management, but I want to comment on also our business, and I think I'll quickly summarize if you go to the next slide too, if you don't mind just swapping around a little bit, Caitlin. So it's in summary, I just want to say this is an overview of Northern Trust, but I think it's quick to say in my own words that Northern Trust is an employer of choice because we have the opportunity to do meaningful work. We collaborate with amazingly intelligent people, and we love celebrating successes. So it's a true win for all of us. This team here represents our wealth management practice. We take great pride in managing complexity around our clients' wealth goals and surrounding their banking, investment management, and trust and advisory needs with a team of specialists who help them navigate inevitable changes to market conditions and life priorities. Since we are planning to discuss how Northern Trust has folded human-centered design into our digital transformation business model, I think it would be initially helpful to establish a common definition. So Carrie, let's get on the same page and have you describe our approach.
Absolutely. And human-centered design is not something unique to Northern Trust by any means. What it really boils down to is a mindset and a process. So the human-centered design mindset is really rooted in empathy for our end users. And in Northern Trust case, that means our clients, our prospective clients, and many of all of the partners that work here at Northern Trust. So we start with empathy and we want to gain a true understanding of what people desire and why. We then, ideation is a huge part of human-centered design. So imagining possibilities that are far out from where we currently are is a key tenet, as well as experimentation. So taking those ideas and prior to fully building something out or launching a new product, making small bets through experimentation and learning from those experiments to hone in on the right solution in the end. So if you go to the next slide, essentially this process is a combination of understanding and making. So when we understand the people that we serve, we can make products and experiences that are grounded in what they need and desire. That is simply at the core human-centered design. Our process, if you go to the next slide, human-centered design is also extremely iterative. So it's not a linear process by any means, and that's why it's depicted here as an infinity loop of both understanding our end users, what needs they have, what they desire, then making things tangible in reaction to that new knowledge that the team has, to then revisit that with, again, the audience that we're designing for, so that we're consistently honing in on the right experience, increasing the level of fidelity. And so we go through this level of iteration multiple times. Underneath all of these are, more detailed activities and workshops and methodologies that we use. But at the very high level, this is kind of how we at Northern think about applying human-centered design to our practice here.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Okay, now that we've covered the fundamentals, let's turn the corner and begin to tell the story, all right? So during our conversation, please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we will try to carve out a little time at the end to answer. All right, David, I'm gonna start with you. Let's begin with a little bit of time travel. So Northern Trust, by all means, is known for being a reputable, stable, and profitable wealth management firm. In 130 years, it's never been acquired or merged with another company. Many of our clients have been with us for generations. In fact, although it serves 25% of the Forbes 500 wealthiest clients, it doesn't showboat and genuinely models stealth leadership. So why disrupt the status quo? Why would a company which manages economic swings and competitive pressures with aplomb decide to take a bet on human-centered design?
So Margaret, I really like the way this question is framed, within the transformation context. We like to say that we're trying to build a startup culture in a 130-year-old financial institution. And we really are. And a big part of that is HCD, human-centered design. And, I think at its core, successful firms, not only adapt to change, but they have to embrace it. They have to constantly evolve to not just meet client expectations, but exceed them. And by the way, I'm going to use the term partner a few times. Partner refers to Northern Trust employees, just to level set, not like a business partner. So, with human-centered design, we're embracing a better, more efficient way to work. And I love the slides Carrie walked through earlier. We live in a changing world. Technology has been a massive disruptor over the last 10, 20 years, and it's going to continue to happen. Our clients, our employees, our partners have a much more sophisticated and and higher demand and expectation of our digital offerings than they ever have in the past. Things that might have been nice to haves or bells and whistles in the past are now just pure table stakes. You have to have them. Something like remote check deposit. If your bank doesn't do that, that's a problem, right? Biometric authentication, self-service, all these things. So in order to adapt to this change, find better ways of working, we have embraced human-centered design because it works, right? There's been empirical evidence and studies, my own story. I've seen it. I've been part of teams both with and without at Northern Trust. Velocity improves. The financials look so much better, and the customer sentiment, the end result that we are delivering, is much more accurate and much better received by the client. And for the teams, it sounds silly, but it's more fun to work in this manner. It's a much faster pace of change. It's very clear direction. And the bottom line is, we're using human-centered design to help us change, to help us innovate, to help us to deliver and exceed our client and partner expectations.
Great. So it's interesting. It's sowing the seeds of creating a culture that's more accessible, open to experimenting with fresh ideas and willing to learn. Just an interesting shift for a company that's operated in one way and shifted to a totally different way. Pretty exciting. So, it's the absence of human-centered design in the past suggests that the user experience was maybe somewhat relegated in terms of its influence shaping IT specifications. Companies like ours relied on voice of the client survey information, net promoter score, and other instruments to isolate client pain points. But these tools, they shed light on a client point of view that was viewed retrospectively and indirectly. Carrie, can you describe how human-centered design has radically changed client engagement and the quality of insights we collect as we build new technology features?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that in our practice, the way that we engage clients and when is really the key. So there will absolutely always be value in, as you mentioned, survey data, net promoter scores, but human-centered design really emphasizes the importance of in-depth and in-context research. Sometimes we call it ethnographic style research, to more deeply understand user pain points and unmet needs. And sometimes that means visiting a client at their home or sitting alongside a partner, again, an employee, to observe their workflow for opening new accounts on behalf of clients. So it really takes us to where the experience is happening, which is critical. And so through this, ethnographic approach, we can witness firsthand the experience that we're trying to improve. And that always, without a doubt, yields surprising findings, rich inspiration for our design team. And really, luckily, a lot of our clients are willing to spend time with us in this way. And they feel important. They feel, which they are. We've invited them into our process. We're co-creating alongside them. And so not only are the insights a higher quality, or a different quality, I should say, it's not better, but it's been a great way also to deepen our engagement with clients and deepen our relationships with them.
Yeah, it really spotlights that without understanding the client and their priorities, we're rudderless, right? So it's just changed the direction of how we gather and collect that and glean insights from it. So as a follow-up, was there ever any apprehension about discovering what clients might say as we introduced human-centered design? I mean, being in the moment with clients, asking them to free up their time and provide honest feedback, it makes you vulnerable, right? So inviting feedback also requires that we acknowledge and respond to the requirements clients define, which could in turn invalidate what internal stakeholders might think is their best path forward. So how did the team figure out how to act on those insights you were extracting? And I'm going to ask David, but I'd like to hear from Carrie as well.
So, this is, again, another terrific question. So I think it's only natural to have some level of apprehension or nervousness when you're getting feedback, especially feedback where you don't know what it's going to be, right? And, my story is the value of knowing that feedback, having candid feedback far outweighs and surpasses any kind of apprehension or nervousness. And you use the term rudderless, and I think there's some truth there. So, not to fall back on my back when I was in developer days, but back when I was a developer, I was part of teams that didn't have designers on them. We didn't have human-centered design. It wasn't a thing yet. And sometimes it worked out. Sometimes we worked really hard. We delivered a feature or function, and we got it in front of users. We learned the hard way that's not what they needed, right? So getting that feedback, I think, is incredibly important to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. But more importantly, I think it's incredibly empowering for our teams. Again, having been part of on the, both the in the trenches and now on the leadership side, having that clear vision of what the opportunity is, knowing that the work you are doing will have a meaningful impact to an end user because we have done our due diligence, we have done our research, we know what our North Star looks like. It's incredibly empowering knowing that you are doing that work that has meaning and it's going to be well received by the end user. And then bottom line, think about the alternative. Think about not doing that research. We're going to make our best guess and kind of roll the dice and say we think we know, but we're going to find out when it gets to prod. There's the human-centered design approach is incredibly empowering for the teams, and it makes so much sense to do. And I've seen it firsthand, work incredibly well. And I'll tell you right now, and I've told Carrie this, I'm never going back. Any team that I'm leading will have a very, very heavy design focus. Carrie?
Yeah, Carrie.
Yeah. Wanted to build on what David said. Absolutely. It's not like we introduced human-centered design to the organization and they said, great, go for it. There's definitely been apprehension, and for good reason. Our partners that own these client relationships are ultimately responsible for client satisfaction. And there's a lot of uncertainty that comes along with introducing that precious client to a new team of designers and researchers who don't know the ins and outs of financial modeling, and bringing that client into a process in which we're intentionally a little bit less on or polished. So that can be uncomfortable, but through relationship building internally and through really meticulous planning of the research protocol itself, bringing partners into that and showing them, here's what we're going to talk about and how, that just goes so long in terms of getting folks comfortable with us interacting with clients directly. So we've been able to get past some of those initial moments of apprehension.
Yeah, it's
and then
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I just wanted to respond to the second part of your question, which was about how we act on the insights. And I was reflecting on that as you were speaking. There are two things that come to mind. One, I feel like the expectations that we set with the clients is really key. So letting them know that what we do as a team is conduct interviews with many different individuals with different needs, and we have to look for patterns across all of that data that we gather. So it's not that we're gathering feedback in a piecemeal fashion and then turning around and building it out exactly as that one individual client has envisioned it. That approach inevitably leads to an end product that feels disjointed, clunky, inconsistent. So setting expectations for how we're going to react to their feedback is very important in terms of managing their satisfaction with Northern Trust long term. And then second, when we come out of research, we really are trying to socialize what we've learned. We tell stories, we reflect on what we've learned, what did we see, and we invite our internal stakeholders into that process, giving them ownership of the decision making as well, so that it doesn't feel like we could go in a completely different direction. We're inviting them in and giving them ownership. So how we act on those insights, those are a few of my thoughts on that.
Great. Yeah, it's remarkable to see a company make that transition and really embrace continuous learning loops. It's making all the difference, I think, in our technology builds. So human-centered design encourages divergent points of view, as both Carrie and David have described, to really allow ideas to flourish. It requires bringing together partners from a range of backgrounds and disciplines in order to transcend the constraints of existing problem-solving exercises to really fuel that innovation. Sakshi, I'm going to ask you this one. How did you configure and unify teams under this model? And how did you strike that right balance to create structure while avoiding rigidity to stimulate that creativity you sought?
Thank you, Margaret. It's a great question. So from the very onset, we start by hiring the right talent. The team has to have expertise that are necessary to deliver the outcomes. We have researcher, designer, developers, product owners, quality assurance engineers. So we start by creating a cross-functional team. This not only improves the efficiency, but it also maximizes the collaboration. And as Carrie was talking about earlier, there's a vision, they have done the interview and we're bringing that all together. There are some ideas that are being, and she talked about bringing, internal partners or stakeholders into that question. So we get, for example, we get the developers involved in the design and usability testing, or we can get a designer, to work with the developers to look at the implementation. So we get the divergent ideas, by facilitating those conversations to then converge in coming up with creative outcomes or solutions. It's not a magic one, and it takes time, and in the spirit of continuous improvement, we're building these high-performing teams. We facilitate Scrum ceremonies. We've been doing zero-based design. We do back-of-the-room conversations to stimulate that creativity.
Yeah, interesting. And I'd love to hear a product owner's perspective now. So Melissa, I'm going to turn to you. And can you tell me in what way does a human-centered design approach impact your reality as a product owner? And maybe you can speak to the challenges you faced and the lessons learned so far.
Hi, Margaret. Thanks. Yeah, good questions. So when we embarked on this digital metamorphosis at Northern Trust in our digital services world, it became very clear that in order to give our partners and clients good experiences, that we had to look beyond our individual products because our users' experiences was spanning across several products. And so as an example, I've been working on an exciting project here where we are revamping our client onboarding experience. And this required a change in mindset to address the whole end-to-end experience as the product itself that we were delivering and not just a specific product. So that's, I think, one big change in what the human-centered design approach has brought. And we did a fun activity as a team with this project where we had to choose a superpower that, if we had any, what we would pick. And the one that really resonated with me most was a shapeshifter. And so as a product owner, I felt like I had to become a shapeshifter so that I could put myself into the shoes of these different users as they're navigating these different tools in this one experience. So those are some of the things that have changed for a product owner role.
So shapeshifter is your superhuman strength instead of flying or reading people's minds, you're a shapeshifter. I love that. It shows how human-centered designs really impacted you, Melissa. Thank you so much. So human-centered design, I'm going to pick on you a little bit, David. It seeks to reframe problems as Carrie originally described through empathy. So I got to say, this is kind of a big leap from the skill set that software engineers and developers are trained around. And while there's a common expectation that technology should be, of course, simple, intuitive, and thoughtful, how do you prioritize the client's point of view as part of a technology build? And tell me how this is now impacting tech delivery, team velocity, and solution design.
Yeah, this is such a great question because it's so important. It really is. And I can tell you emphatically that when I did my computer science undergrad, there was no mention of empathy in any of my computer science courses. It didn't exist. But, I've seen firsthand in the variety of roles that I've played at Northern, how important and how powerful empathy can be. And it is an absolutely key or core point of human-centered design. And to that end, I'll tell a brief story about how it directly impacted me back many, many moons ago, more than I will admit. I was part of a delivery team, and we were doing some work with one of the Northern client-facing help desks, right? And these folks would get hundreds, thousands of calls a day, and we did a go and see. So I'm sitting with some of the folks and watching them. Every time a client calls, they would search that client record in the system. That search would take 30 seconds plus to execute. Now think about that. If you're getting hundreds of calls a day, 30 seconds a pop, that's rough. That's a lot of cycles you're just spinning. And it just so happened that we own that application. So seeing that experience, seeing the frustration with these users firsthand was incredibly empowering for me. I can tell you, I went back to my desk that day, and there's never been a more motivated developer at Northern Trust than I was that day to go fix that problem, to see firsthand how something is impacting the end users. And we did. I think we ended up taking it from like 30 seconds down to a tenth of a second, and it was just dramatic improvement. But that was a very eye-opening event for me also. Putting myself in the eyes, the moccasins, if you will, of the end user, and understanding that the work I'm doing is going to have direct impact to their experience, to their daily interactions with our systems. And just getting the teams in that mindset, again, this scales across our delivery teams, trying to think about things from the user's perspective. And with Carrie and her team, leading the design and the research here, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the equation, where not only do the teams understand that the work they're doing is meaningful, it has direct impact and uplift to the end user, clients, or partners, but it really provides that North Star vision of the direction that we're moving towards, and helps the team see the forest for the trees, to be a little cliche, but it's incredibly important to have that empathy. It's not mutually exclusive. It's complementary to solid developmental and architectural design, right? Yeah. To understand not only how you're going to do it, but why you're doing it. It's incredibly empowering, and there's so much unlock in empathy, and having the right amount of empathy for your end users.
Can I jump in on that really quick?
Yeah, please do.
Sure.
So I think it's great to hear that has been your experience, David. I feel that empathy is a human skill. Like, all humans have empathy for others, and really for our developers and our technologists, it's really about just giving them permission to act upon that empathy, and perhaps prioritize that in light of pending looming deadlines or velocity goals. Like, just giving them permission to always act in the service of the end user, and really use that as our guidepost, I think, is important. But it's something that everyone has. It's just giving them permission to unlock it and act upon it.
And if I may add to that too, very, very important point, Carrie, thank you. And we've been doing that in our zero-based design sessions, where, if you remember that infinity loop that Carrie talked about in one of her slides, we do start with the design, but now we incorporate that in the make process with development. We're expanding that a little bit more, where all the research that Carrie's team has done, where she talked about how she reached out to the RM side, developers are now reaching out into the design side and asking those questions. And the zero-based design sessions were designed just for that, so unique to our new operating model, that the developers are now actually putting themselves into the shoes, empathizing, and then creating creative solutions, but at the same time thinking how would it be feasible technologically. So we're really marrying the two processes, and it's coming out beautifully. Sorry.
No, that's great. A great conversation. And I think you're right. Everyone's got good intentions. They want to do the right thing, and what they want to build is something better. So it kind of reminds me, speaking of shoes, we brought up the metaphor of shoes a lot here. It reminds me of that Scott Cook quote, who is the founder of Intuit. He said, empathy is not walking in another's shoes. First, you must remove your own. So so much for all that commentary. So I heard a lot of things about risk as it relates to human-centered design. So does human-centered design encourage risk-taking, or does it actually de-risk the investment we make in technology? And I'm going to start with you, David, and then Carrie, maybe you can describe how experimentation and prototyping helps to answer this question.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to give you something of a counterintuitive answer, but I'll drill down. So short answer, absolutely yes. human-centered design does emphatically encourage risk-taking. And what my experience has been, that risk-taking actually turns into a dramatic risk mitigation. So reducing long-term risk, and I'll explain why. So part of my role nowadays, as much as I yearn for the days when I was a developer or a data architect, is, managing the bottom line, the team velocity, the financials, ultimately the delivery of the end product. And, I made this comment before, I've been part of teams that didn't have a human-centered design approach, didn't have designers on the team, where, we did a great job building to spec, and, we missed the mark. We get in front of users and they're like, thank you, but not really what we need, go back and do it again. And it's incredibly frustrating for the team to have that experience. It dramatically impacts your velocity, your delivery, and the financials are blown out of the water. And what I've seen with human-centered design is, again, it removes a lot of the guesswork from that equation. So we have much higher confidence that what we're building is moving in the right direction. It will be meaningful to the end user and really reduces the risk associated with, missing the mark, elongated delivery timelines, your CapEx, OpEx running, X% over. But the risk-taking piece is really interesting. That's something that I like to tell the teams that, there's nothing sacred, right? No idea is too crazy, too bold, too big. Nothing's off the table. If you want to come propose, a business group reorg or a $20 million SaaS solution, I want to hear about that, right? So we encourage the big, bold, different, innovative ideas. I think that's part of the reason we've been successful in this move is, not only encouraging teams to take those risks, but providing that environment of psychological safety where it's okay to take risks, right? Where, if it doesn't pan out, that's fine. We get fast feedback. We, the term fail fast. And it's true. It mitigates your risk because your exposure is minimized in terms of cost and time, time and treasure, right? You've headed down the wrong path, you learn fast, and you course correct after 2 weeks, a month, rather than 6 months, a year later. I've been on both sides of that equation. I can tell you right now, the human-centered design approach that both encourages risk-taking and mitigates risk at the same time is the way to go, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to support that risk-taking on the design side, experimentation is absolutely a key tenet of human-centered design. And the way that we as designers support that is through, very low fidelity concepts, prototypes, where we are simply just trying to make our hypotheses tangible. Here's what we've learned. Here's what we think a better solution could be. Let's mock that up in a lo-fi way. We don't have to build it out to get fast feedback. So hand sketches, concept illustrations, clickable wireframes, like all of this just helps us make tangible that future imagined experience so that we can get feedback on it. So really, it's just about making things tangible and using that prototyping process to continually hone in on our finalized kind of design decisions that we should actually then kind of make that bigger risk. Let's build it, right? So so that's kind of how design supports in this regard.
Great. Thanks to you both. So let's go back to Agile for a second. So there's several parallels between design thinking and Agile, including iteration and user centricity. We all know the Agile method aims to deliver a smaller set of features in shorter cycles. Theoretically, the goal is to test and improve during development. But how do you reconcile Agile principles of fast delivery with human-centered design tenets of research, analysis, and end user satisfaction? Sakshi, can you tell all of us if they sometimes in reality are incompatible?
That's a great question, Margaret. So yeah, if you look at the onset, they look that they're incompatible. But what we've done here, and again, I go back to Carrie's infinity diagram there, it can be incorporated in our operating model. And so you start by hiring the right talent. You have the POs or lead arcs, the lead scrum masters, your designer and your researchers, all part of one team that go about and do the initial conversations with the client and do the research, like as Carrie mentioned. And what we call this is a sprint zero. There's no software that's produced as an output of the sprint, but that's the start. And then what we call them is the runway team. So that's on one hand. And then the rest of the teams just follow naturally. So from this team of designers, one designer is embedded in every feature team. So let's say we move here, the feature teams then have the developers, the software testers, and now you have the designer embedded in them. And then as that team starts the delivery software, we deliver a small amount and then we circle right back into the design team, which is doing the runway. So this kind of goes on. At the heart of it, I feel, is the product owner who's really responsible for both sides in looking into the design and research aspect, as Melissa earlier had mentioned, shape shifting and trying to empathize, and also being responsible for the backlog of the delivery and overall just trying to make sure that we are incrementally delivering that value. And so we can actually make this work, to answer that question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it looks like an agile outlook essentially frames the business needs against, the brightest technical options. So we start on the right foot. All right, a big impediment for organizations who consider adopting design thinking is that it challenges a command and control paradigm, which tends to favor centralized decision-making. For companies who have a penchant for traditional hierarchical structures and lines of reporting, how do you make the shift to replace this with empowered teams? And how do you promote the concept of progress over perfection versus waiting for projects to be fully ready before delivery? And maybe Sakshi or Carrie or any one of you can jump in on this one.
That's a great question, Margaret. Well, actually, it really starts with change management. When we start to make these changes, it's not easy, to be honest. So you go one team at a time, one delivery at a time to change that shift over time, and to really look at progress over perfection. You take in that first couple of slivers of code that you have and you deployed it into production, to leave it up to the good hands of our product owners to decide when do they want to release. And as soon as it's released, you get to test it. You get to test it in the market, you get quick feedback. And so you bring it back, and then that's how you show incremental progress over this big bang release. And I'll let Carrie fill in with, based on her experience.
Well, what I first wanted to say is in terms of making the shift, I think at Northern Trust, at least, one thing that's helped us make that shift is formalizing our new approach in terms of there is an operating model. It's documented. You can look at it on a slide. And so it's not just this kind of hearsay, somebody kind of saying what they would like. We've formalized it, and it gives people permission to work in that different way, with these empowered teams. But then also, as I was thinking about, how do you continue to support that shift? I guess I would say that there's, at large companies like Northern, there will always need to be a place for some degree of hierarchy, and really, it's now the responsibility of those empowered teams to provide the rationale for the decisions that they're making or the recommendations that they have, and through those rationale, garner the support from the senior executives, stakeholders, business leaders, whoever. So I still think there's a place for hierarchy. It's just a more democratic approach where everyone has a voice and everyone has a seat at the table when it's time to make those important decisions of how to provide new experiences for our clients.
Yeah. I can support that with an example. So we've taken client feedback in what they would like to see in a new modernization product, and the development team develops it and puts it right back in front of pilot testers with proper education, internal partners as well as clients through the change management process. And once it's handed over, they read it out, they test it and say, don't like it, right back into the system. So this is how you go back to the senior management to say, if we'd done big bang, this would have all been not appreciated, but now we're able to market test real quick. And that's how teams who are empowered are able to bring that back and say, we are delivering value. We are able to mitigate the risk by bringing this upfront into the market.
Yeah, yeah. The power distance is actually shrinking, right? It's pretty exciting. It's creating this flatter, more horizontal structure, and that allows a wider range of stakeholders to participate in key decisions. I think everyone is in favor of that. So Northern Trust digital transformation treats the employee experience with this similar intensity as the client experience. I think we've maintained a philosophy that achieving a really deep understanding of all end users will produce really rewarding and frictionless interactions. What has been the reaction of partners to be a core part of transformational change? And how are you accommodating their preferences too? Melissa, I'd love to hear from you on this since you just went through a big transformation.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. So our partners have been actually blown away by the changes that we're making. And the feedback is that they feel like we are really listening, and that it's obvious in the changes that we're making that we've understood them and where they're coming from and what their pain points are. And so it's very refreshing to hear. They also know that we're open to all feedback. And so we've said a few times that, Agile and the human-centered design allows us to make some changes, put it in front of our users, and then go back to make more changes if it's not quite right. And so giving them a voice to be able to tell us that something's not quite right and giving us that feedback and then actioning that feedback is the key point here. And so we have had some changes that we've made. So we had one project that we piloted with some users, and the feedback told us that it just wasn't quite right yet. And we, instead of rolling it out and making our users have this not great experience, we went back to make some more changes to make sure that we were giving them, an improved experience. And so our partners, or internal partners, really appreciate that because they, in the past, I think, have had to accept these imperfect and bad experiences in the past. And so this is just a change for them, and they feel like they're heard and their voice is heard. So it's very encouraging.
Digital's touching everyone, right? Including
Yes.
employees. So a cultural transformation underpins digital transformation. We've got to honor everyone who's going to be using the new technology. I'm going to have one more question, and then I see there's a couple that have come in over the chat that I want to make sure we have a few minutes to address. So Sakshi, I'm going to ask you this one, and then we're going to respond to some of our viewers' questions. Let me just ask you quickly about outcomes. You operate delivering design during a sprint. I want you to talk about that a little bit. How do you measure if the end user attributes of desirability and usability are satisfied during short time-boxed periods?
Oh, that's a great question. So by making desirability and usability as part of your definition of done, you make sure when a story or a slice of that story is worked upon, that those elements are fully tested and moved to complete. We have a division at Northern which looks into ADA compliance, which is American with Disability Act. So as part of our story's definition of done, we also want to make sure voiceover commands or anything else that falls under that, those requirements have also been met. Our software quality testers make sure that that's tested. But the quick way to measure, again, is to make sure that you're able to deliver these consistently, and over the period of time, your stream of delivery is then by virtue of product owners deciding a piece of a feature is ready for release. You can measure it when it is released in the hands of either our beta testers or a small set of testers, or you can expose it to the bigger market. But measuring requires using Google Analytics or Google Hearts, and then eventually, as Carrie mentioned earlier, go back and look at your Net Promoter Scores, client satisfaction survey, so that this is being tested consistently. And as I mentioned earlier, if we find out that it did not go right, then we can also pivot. And I want to add, though, that Carrie's team is heavily involved in this process all throughout. So as Melissa mentioned, too, that that when we are in the process of rolling out something, I think Carrie's team then goes back and gets some quick feedback, say, are we on track? Like, do we need to pivot? So again, that infinity circle goes out, and we're doing continuous improvement, continuous delivery, and creating these high performance team through this process. But going back to your question, measuring happens throughout that process.
Great. Thank you so much, Sakshi. Here's a really interesting question. And David, maybe you can talk to this one, which is very relevant given the timeline of the pandemic. This question states, in this work from home environment, how do you adapt the process when you can't sit by someone's desk to observe how they operate? It kind of defeats the sticky notes that you see on the wall in a lot of the pictures when you describe agile and human-centered design.
That's an incredibly timely question. I agree. I'll say a couple of words, and Sakshi, I'd love to get your thoughts too. So if you haven't picked up on this, Sakshi is a ninja, with all things Scrum, Agile, and building high velocity teams. But back to the question. So hands down, COVID and the pandemic have dramatically changed the way we work. So I think there was a time where it's like going on 14 months, I was working from home, right? Same with a lot of our delivery teams. I think we've managed our way through that through the use of a variety of collaboration tools and interaction tools, things like Miro or Teams or the other video chats. More frequent video type meetings, I think, play some of that. And I agree, there are challenges to building that very tight team when there's no physical interaction. It's definitely a different dynamic. I will say that the teams have responded incredibly well. Like, they just blew my expectations out of the water over the past, since early 2020, I guess, when COVID became a thing. But partly the technology, partly the mindset. We all accept the fact that we're not going to be physically present for a while, that we need to find new, different, more efficient ways of interacting with our coworkers. And I'll tell you this right now. As part of our digital metamorphosis, we are growing very rapidly, right? So we have dozens of employment opportunities within our world, both on the business and the technology side. And one of the things we're looking at is, based on the experience we've had with remote work and how successful we have been, kind of opening up to more, remote work, long-term options, full-time work from home, which was not a thing. It didn't exist, right? And I can tell you right now, 2 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy. We're never going to do that. But seeing it work in practice and the teams responding has been incredibly eye-opening. And then the last point I'll make is, while somebody like myself can give broad direction and provide some tooling and things like that, the teams themselves find their right way to work. They right size their interaction. There's not a one size fits all model, and that's something that I think is incredibly important. Is that you can provide some guardrails and guidelines, whatever, but the teams themselves need to find what is their interaction, what is that groove that works for them. Right, that's, I think, where we've been really successful. We empower, we give the tools, but then we let them figure out what is the right way for them to work.
And to form and conform these teams that we've just made over, pandemic. They've never met everybody on this panel in front of me. I have never met you in person. We worked at the same company for so many years. I've been at Northern for 14. Yeah. You've been at Northern for 14, David.
It's too funny.
And we've never met in person, yet we've delivered this project. Melissa keeps talking about, like, our partners are satisfied. We've done all this. Carrie's done all this research. We've been able to do this. And for teams like my team, and I work with them to get them, we stand up every day. We meet how to get to know them, get to work with them, and have fun. Like, as a Scrum Master, I have to build some fun into the process for our team members. And so how do we do that over the pandemic? We've done it. We're proud to say we've done it.
Awesome. Carrie, I'm going to ask you, and maybe you can segue into comments about that last question, but as well as I'll just kind of bundle a couple of other final thoughts. One is from one of the viewers today asking about some aha moments when you were in user empathy stage, which is a great question.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to follow it up with a zinger around whether human-centered design is a silver bullet.
Cool. I'm happy to take that. Yeah, it's funny, the aha moments, I feel like rather than one big one on a project, they usually come over time, and they're these little things, and you start to add it up and see patterns, and that creates that big aha. But I mean, I have some memorable stories for sure. Well, Northern Trust, for example, provides in our wealth management business, we provide estate planning, estate settlement services, which can overlap during periods of our clients' lives where they might be navigating the loss of a loved one or have lost the primary person that in their family that Northern Trust was really interacting with. And so as we were trying to, through client research, understand how to better work with the client and their families, and that in those kind of stressful moments. It was interesting. We were in New York, and this lovely woman was sitting down with me, and she was just so matter of fact about this issue, and she was very proud to tell me what her solution was in terms of how do I prepare my daughters for when I pass and they need to kind of take the reins financially. And she had invented this concept of what she called a croaking box. And it's a shoebox that she keeps under her bed, and it has all of the important documents, the keys, the trusts, the wills, like everything you need to the passwords. It's in her croaking box. So her daughters know that when she passes, they can go and find that croaking box and feel confident that they have all of the information that they need to then step in and start working with Northern Trust. So I just had to chuckle about that one. That was a funny memory and just a great idea, I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so, Carrie, follow up on that.
Yeah.
Do you think,
Mhm.
zinger here, do you think human-centered design is a silver bullet? Is it the pinnacle in terms of how we build new technology?
Yeah. I mean, does a silver bullet exist for anything? I wish I could say yes. It is a silver bullet, but here at Northern, human-centered design as a methodology has served us very well. But that alone will not, accelerate our ability to make change or drive adoption of these new experiences that we're building. So, it's important. It's an important component, but I would say that our ability to execute and deliver that change that stems from this methodology is really the critical piece, and just having the vision and the inspiration is not enough, and so it's essentially like at the core of everything is our people, right? It's our talent. It's equipping our talent with the right tools. And without that foundation, human-centered design as a methodology cannot succeed.
Yeah, really good viewpoint. It's ranges across every step of the way, from the initial insights to all the change management process, with a ton of building in between. So given the time, I'd like to thank our panelists for your passion on this topic and for the insights and inspirations you shared. And I would love to see us extend this fun conversation. What are ways all of you have encountered human-centered design within your respective roles? We'd love to hear from you and learn from you. So feel free to reach out to any one of us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to answer questions, get your feedback on improvements we have yet to adopt, and share more of this really magical point in time where Northern Trust is building something extraordinary from the ground up. It's a great time to be part of this organization. So our sincerest appreciation to WITI for organizing the session, and a special thanks to all of you for attending. So make it a great day.
Thanks so
Awesome.
much,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.